Hi, welcome or welcome back. My name is Eleanor, and this week I read only one book. It's a brand new book that's just about to come out. It's called Audition by Katie Kitamura. This is the first time that I have been able to read a book before publication, and thank you to Penguin Random House Australia for sending it to me. I'm a big fan of Katie Kitamura's previous book, Intimacies, and I couldn't wait for this one to come out. And I was not disappointed. There is a difficulty in talking about this book because I see it as a psychological thriller with some minor hints of horror elements or horror tropes. And that makes for a thrilling, page-turning book, which would be ruined if it was to be spoiled for you. So I'll be very careful in my review. Now, if you come to this book as I do, having read and enjoyed such works as, let's say, Sheila Hetty's Motherhood, or Aishagul Savash's The Anthropologists, or The Wilderness, or maybe you're a Rachel Cusk fan. So you come to this book knowing that there's already I don't want to call it a trend, but in a way it's a tradition for some female writers to discuss the pros and cons of having a baby, what it's like to think about it, to decide not to, or to have one, and then also what it's like in the early years when you've had the baby, how you cope. Most interestingly for me, those works, which I've discussed in previous videos, have all portrayed an artistic, creative woman on one side of the seesaw, and on the other seesaw, family life, etc. Now, when you pick up this book, you're taken, it's as if you're in a time capsule that takes you back and forth intermittently and unexpectedly between a time when you were young, ambitious, you generally felt attractive, you generally felt noticed, and you had a lot of dreams for yourself and your creativity. And then all of a sudden you're powered through to a time in your life when you're middle-aged. So in this particular case, the protagonist is 49. And she has had a long-term marriage. She's a well-known, successful actor. She's been offered some great roles. One of them she is rehearsing for at the moment. They're about to start a new play in a couple of weeks. And there's a sense that while on the one hand, and I'm talking about symbols here, and I'm trying to generalize so as not to give anything away. On the one hand, you're young and fantastic and you do whatever you like. And on the other hand, you have wisdom of decades of experience, whether it be with love relationships or career relationships. And you might find yourself with an adult son or daughter. So you no longer have the focus, which has been so far the focus that I've found in most novels that deal with motherhood. The focus being the decision-making, wanting control over your body to decide when or if at all you want to become pregnant, and then how to deal with actually having the baby. What Katie Kitamura does in this novel is that she skips in time from the extreme. You're either 49 or you're in your mid-20s. And that's not to say that she has memories or flashbacks or anything like that. This novel works on symbols and metaphors. It's quite an open novel, so you can interpret it several different ways. It's a page turner because every scene has a tension, a psychological, emotional tension to it. And it's a theatrical type of text. It's not set up like a script or a play, but it does have certain elements of it. So every time you have a scene, someone wants something from another person who doesn't necessarily want to give it. And that propels you along, together with some elements that are so surprising. They do offer some horrifying thrills as well. So how does she do that? Katie Kitamura, I mean. She has her protagonist who is telling the story in first person, describe her own craft as an experienced actor. And just as she describes how she's rehearsing a scene, how she might have in the past honed her skills in trying to read motivation into the dialogue that's on the page of the script, how she might compare what's happening to her character on stage to her own experiences in her own life. Just as she's describing that, it's also the style is seeping into her narrative structure. So there are many moments where the narrator, she'll describe something that's happening in a restaurant when she's sitting in a restaurant with someone she's just met, for example. And it has no connection to her work as an actress. And yet she's still doing that work of trying to find the motivation. What's her motivation? What's the other person's motivation? What's the essence of each one's need? And very early on as the reader, you realize that many of the conclusions that she comes to could not possibly be known. She ascribes motivation to people without really having any proof that is their motivation. She only has an ability, an uncanny ability to read body language and interpret language to the best of her ability. So here she is, and she's gotten to the stage where the border between her work, her creative outlet, her love, her ambition, and her experiences within her family unit are sometimes, the border can sometimes be very stark and solid, immovable, and at other times it seems to be actually blurring and almost disappearing. And this is done very subtly in the way Katie Kitamura describes scenes. And it's not on the nose. It's not like reading a description of dialogue or a scene in a screenplay, but in the repetition of certain set pieces. For example, the restaurant that you find your characters in the first half, and then again in the second half. There's a delineation in this book at exactly halfway through, which is also very pleasing to me. I love the symmetry of it. You might also have props that reappear. You might have a scarf that is mentioned offhand, really, but a couple of times in the first half. And then in the second scarf, in the second half, another scarf appears. This is all beautifully, delicately embroidered into the story. So that multi-layered psychological interpretation is a possibility for the reader as well as for the protagonist. Now, just as in drama, just as in theater, you might wear different clothes and look different, sometimes the protagonist feels an uncanny realization that she's looking at, let's say, her longtime husband, as if he is dressed in a stranger's clothes. Or so she might look at herself in the mirror and be not quite sure if it's the true her or not. Most thrilling to me is the way the protagonist and Kitamura describe lighting as well. When something dramatic and strange occurs, all of a sudden all the lights come on. And it really does feel as if halfway through the book and then at the end, there are certain dramatic situations that might as well be on stage for the power, the impact, and the celebration of drama that they represent. So what is this drama? What is it? It's I'm talking about psychological suspense. I mean, is someone being hurt? Is someone being killed? Is horror? What does that mean? Are they ghosts? Are they? No. It is simply the inner life of a middle-aged woman as she tries to come to terms with her situation. And that has a lot to do with being not only an actor, but also a wife and a woman who is set within a family structure. And there is a lot of exploration of what it means to be the parent of an adult child, of an adult son or daughter. When we think generally about the decision to have a baby, we're usually thinking only of the baby. But if you do decide to, have a child, that child, you're going to be spending probably many more years, if not decades, with that child as an adult than not. And the years of infancy, toddlerhood, teenage years will all fade into insignificance, and you feel this so strongly within the story. And it's thrilling to me to read about this, because it's not very often that you do find it in such books. At a certain point, the protagonist says that, looking at an adult child, she feels might perhaps be like looking at a familiar stranger. And that's exactly it. You've let's say you've given birth to them. Let's say they've, you've been this close to them. You've known everything about their life, everything about their body, everything to do with their decisions. And then at a certain point, you know almost nothing. There is certainly a horror element to that. How can you know someone so intimately and yet they can be a stranger to you? And of course, that applies to any family member, I suppose. It's an unsettling book. It's a thrilling book. And I feel that there's an element, it has a foundation of such truth to it. But I don't know if every reader would be able or even want to access that. We live in a world where we like to think that relationships are between mother and child or between husband and wife can be discussed and described in a certain way, but if you just take it a step further and use your imagination a little bit more and add some elements that are completely unexpected, or perhaps you don't quite trust your own judgment and your own ability to weave the plot, the narrative of your own life, I think that that's when there's potential for you to truly get at an element of truth that those other methods of writing can never come close to. So yes, it's a very, very fast read. I found it very satisfying. I feel like it's a masterpiece. It's almost a theatrical masterpiece. And I felt very empowered after reading it, because I felt somehow that this book has added to the contemporary creation of a new canon, which focuses on the life of the middle-aged woman in the 21st century. It's not the full story, but it adds so much to the story, and I found it absolutely thrilling. So I highly recommend it. I would love for you to comment if you do end up reading it, as it's coming out, I believe, in next week. I wish you all the best. Thank you for listening, and don't forget, the only real property is the property of the mind. Bye.